this was about as bizarre and as easy as it gets.
So the number for me was a number that would allow me to never have to work.
I feel like we got top.
I went from a sale of $500,000 to in debt.
$192 million.
This is Built to Sell Radio with your host, John Warrillow.
Okay, so what are the numbers on your company's dashboard? My guess is you look at your company's revenue and profitability, which are two great metrics to track, but there are another 8 key drivers of the value of your company that go well beyond just revenue and profitability, that are the things that acquirers want to know about. Going and getting your Value Builder score will help you look at your business through the lens of an acquirer. It takes about 15 minutes to do. Go to valuebuilder.com to get your score. So really excited to have this next episode with Erik Van Horn, who started a Sola Salon franchise in an area. He built it up to 12 franchises and sold it. And it is a really, really fascinating story. Listen out for what he calls the bad boy clause and how to structure an agreement with partners. He talks about the danger of using a multiple as a way to value your business and sort of clinging to a multiple as a valuation metric. He's a bigger believer in something he talks about being a dream number and identifying what your dream number is to sell your company. One of the gotchas in the sale of his business was assigning leases and getting landlord assent. So he does a great job describing the gotcha there and some of the things to look out for. He talks about TI dollars, and I'll let him describe what that is. And also, if you're getting money to build out your business, if you're borrowing money, watching out for prepayment penalties. So lots of great stuff in this episode with Erik Van Horn. Erik Van Horn, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
So you're in the hair salon business. How does one get into the hair salon business?
That's what I tell my 3 little girls, that I'm in the salon business, and they think it's the coolest thing. But anybody who knows me knows I don't know anything about the salon business.
Awesome. How did you get into it?
So I've been in franchising since my mid-20s, and I bought and sold different franchises. And then I started to help people buy franchises. And so the reason I started to help people buy franchises is because I was always looking for my next deal. And so I found myself in a meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona in early 2014 with the founders of Sola Salon Studios. And they'd come from a different business and had success in that. They founded Sola Salons, and I was fascinated by their story. And so I found them at the bar, which is a good place to find these 2 guys. And I drilled them for about 2 hours, question after question about their business, and kept buying them drinks. And they just kept telling me more. And these guys were not salon guys at all, but they had stumbled into this business of salon suites, which is more of a real estate business than it is in the salon business. Meaning that what we would do is we would take about 7,000 square feet of retail space, and we would put about 40 individual suites in there, and we would lease those out to salon professionals like hairstylists and estheticians and massage therapists, and we would lease it to them on 1 to 2 year contracts, and they would pay us on a weekly basis. So it's more in the real estate business than the salon business, but my daughters still think I know the salon business.
There you go. So you've been in and around franchises. So did you buy the physical physical territory from the Sola Salon guys?
Yeah, so they had basically just sold to friends and family. And whenever you're buying a franchise and they're early on, they are more generous in what they give you. And so I and my business partners, my soon-to-be business partners, we purchased the rights to develop all of Orange County, California. And so we purchased the rights to develop 12 stores there. And they couldn't come in and develop anymore until we reached our development plan. And so, yeah, we locked down that whole market.
And so in your purchase agreement, did you contemplate what the exit options would be for you down the road?
Yes and no. We knew that there's leverage when you own an entire market. And so we did go into it wanting to, whenever you buy a market like that, it's offensive and defensive. So we wanted to grow to 12 locations if the plan was going to be successful and if it is what we wanted it to be. But we also knew if we were only going to get to 5 or 6 or 7 locations, we wanted to block out as many people from coming to develop as possible. So it was an offensive and defensive move at the same time. And later on, we ended up buying 3 more territories just for that reason, to block other people from coming in and maintaining exclusivity within the market.
And I know that in some franchise agreements, there is a stipulation that says, look, you can't sell this without us approving who you're going to sell it to. Did that exist in the early franchise agreement?
Yes, it did. I think that's probably in pretty much every franchise agreement, like you said. There's kind of that we can buy it out before anybody else clause is in there. And I've never run into that issue in a franchise that I've been in, and this was no exception. We eventually sold it to the parent company, and it was actually a private equity group that bought it. But that was the intention all along. When we made that decision to sell it, that was the intention.
Excellent. Now, who's the we here? You mentioned you and your partners. Maybe just to give me a sense of who were the equity holders in your Orange County business.
So there is 4 of us total, and we each own 25% of the business. And so when we got into it, we'd known each other from other franchises that we'd been a part of and knew each other's strengths and weaknesses and just who we were. And I needed partners at the time to come into something like this because these things were about $1 million each to build out. And I didn't have, $12 million in the bank to do that myself. And so I brought 3 other partners into the partnership group, and that's what we started with. It was Dan, Ryan, and John.
And the money that you needed, it was to build out these locations. My understanding is they cost about $1 million in leasehold improvements to get them into the structure that you want.
Yeah, that's it. And at the time, SBA was loaning on the build out. So we went to SBA for our first 2.
SBA being Small Business Administration. Yep. Exactly.
And they were basically the backers of the loan. And we went through the normal bank. They were backed by SBA. And we thought we were, great. That's how we're going to do all of these things, because we got 2 loans approved at the same time, which isn't always easy. And so we had that, and we figured, well, when it's time for 3, 4, 5, and 6, we'll just do the same thing. And then what happened is other salon suites started to come into the market, and SBA thought, well, these things are not really that active. The owners are not active in the business, which is true. I mean, we were not that active in the business, and SBA likes to loan on more active owner participants, and that was not the salon suite business. So SBA completely shut down lending in anything that was a salon suite.
So the 4 of you guys, you and your 3 partners, you're kind of the entrepreneurs, the money guys, but you're not in there, swiping people's debit cards, making appointments for their next hair visit. You're not operating the business. You're really.
Yeah, that's the 4 of us were really came from a place of, we want to work on the business, not in the business, very much that E-Myth mindset.
Sure.
And all the business that we've owned in the past were what we call semi-absentee. So we were not very active. We wanted a business that we could put managers in place, and it wasn't employee heavy. And that's what made this one so attractive.
And so the people part of the equation here is you have to recruit a full-time manager of each location, I'm assuming. Is that right?
Well, I'll dive into that. That's what you would think, and some models are like that. But this one, the structure, and this was at our peak when we had 12 of them open, we had 1 director of operations, and then underneath them, we had 3 managers that would oversee 4 locations each. And then they had a full-time maintenance person and a full-time bookkeeper. So that there was about 6 employees at our peak.
Got it. And whose job is it to recruit the individual stylist and convince them to set up their little, store within a store, if you will, in a solo salon, as opposed to, one down the street?
So the marketing is the owners had a lot of say in the marketing and how we did it, and it changed throughout the life of the business. Early on, it was you throw up a Craigslist ad for next to nothing, and they would answer that, and we would show them, and they hadn't seen anything like it before, and they were sold. So it was really easy at that point in the early days. And then there more competition started coming in, and it wasn't as easy, and Craigslist just changed in the way that it was being used. So it got to be a little bit more difficult. We started to do more online advertising and a lot of referral. So we wanted to make the environment inside the salon just like the best thing that they've ever seen, and their business starts to increase, and they start making more money, having more freedom, and then they start referring more people. So a lot of it was referral. At the end of the day, we got a lot of referrals.
Is there any consistency, franchises generally, there's, you go into pick a franchise, McDonald's, the cup size is always the same, regardless of whether you're in Arizona or you're in Toronto, it's always the same. What elements of the Sola franchise were identical versus what was at the discretion of the individual stylist?
So the stylists had a lot of individual discretion on what they could do because they're very creative people. And so once they're inside their suite, they could pretty much do anything that they wanted. From our standpoint at Sola, there was a couple different color schemes that we could choose from, a couple different packages that we could choose from. So it did have a consistent look and feel throughout the country, and we wanted that specifically in Orange County. So they go to one, they're going to get the same feeling and look at another one. So that the stylist had a ton of discretion. We as franchisees did not have nearly as much.
And how much? How did you make money? So I'm assuming you're making money off of the fees that the individual stylists pay to rent their small kind of cubicle within the overall building. Is that, or are you also taking a percentage of whatever they sell? No,
we kept it really simple, and they did not want to be micromanaged. That's why they would move from their traditional salon to Sola, because they want to get out of the drama. They did not want to be micromanaged, and they wanted to keep more of the money that they're actually making. So it was a transition between either they have a choice to stay at their salon, which most of them hated, or go and start their own salon, which most of them didn't have the stomach to do. So this was a nice middle ground for them to be owners of their own business. And so for that, we wanted to keep it real simple for them. And we would give them the keys. We would paint it for them the color that they wanted. And in return, they would pay us every month. So we're paying the landlord, $1, and the stylists are paying us $2, and the gap is where we're making our profit.
How was your accounts receivable? Because stylists, love them or hate them, they're not known to be the best business people. And so I'm assuming you had serious AR issues where you had stylists not paying their bills. I mean, was that an issue for you guys?
Well, we love them. We don't hate them. So, no, they were great. And I think it's the type of stylist that you bring in, because you're right. They're not known for what you just mentioned. And so we were picky on who we brought in. We didn't let just anybody come in. We wanted to make sure they had a book of business and they're actually doing better. And I think that's one of the reasons stylists are used to paying every week. So believe it or not, we did not have many challenges with that. I think at our peak, maybe a handful a week, which if you let it get out of control, then it becomes a challenge. But if you don't let it get out of control, you go and work with them and you set things up right away, then it doesn't become an issue. And it was never really a big issue for us.
How did you and the three other partners navigate your partnership agreement? How was that structured, and how did it sort of play out for you guys?
Well, I'll give you the end of the story. We're all still friends, so that's a good thing. We all call each other up, and some of us have been and are partners in other businesses currently. So early on, for the outcome to happen the way that it did, all being friends, we knew we had to have lots of uncomfortable conversations early on what it would look like. And so we hired a really good attorney and who had done a lot of partnership agreements, and some of them within Sola Salon Studio, other partnerships that they had. So we started to engage with him, and over a lot of discussion, a lot of money, and a lot of rabbit trails, we had a really robust operating agreement that, has pretty much everything written into it. And we had to go back to it at different times through the partnership, because we'd look at it and be like, okay, this is what the agreement says, and this is why we did it. And this is what we're going to follow. Whether one of us likes it or doesn't like it at the time, that's what we set up early.
Can you give me an example of an issue that came up that you had to refer back to the agreement?
Even during the sale of the business, we had to, because at different times, different partners were ready to sell, and others were like, I'm not so sure, because we think it's a great business. And we all kind of flip-flopped around at different times. And that was one of the things that I look back and I'm like, I'm glad we have this in there, because it basically, as long as 3 of the partners agreed on a sales price, one partner couldn't hold up the entire sale for whatever reason. And so that was one of the things that I look back and I was glad that we had in there, and it proved to be helpful towards the end. And everybody was on the same page. But as you can imagine, selling a business with 4 different people at different stages in their lives and different reasons for wanting to sell and wanting to keep it, and different goals, that could present a challenge. And we were able to work through that with the help of the operating agreement.
So the operating agreement stipulated that 3 of the 4 of you had to agree to sell the business, and the other 4 would have to basically go along with it.
Yes. Yeah. The other one that didn't agree with it, they would have to, just go along with it. And I'm glad it was written that way, whatever side I was on, because I wouldn't want to be the guy that was holding something up for 3 other people. And I wouldn't want to have that, that on me. So the agreement spelled it out for us.
So many guys and gals get into business with sort of the best intentions, 3 musketeers, all for one, one for all, but then find out that they forgot to paper some of the more detailed things. So what advice would you give a new partnership group going into business for the first time? And I'm looking for something here, Erik, if you could think of something very specific that, of course, we're going to contemplate the major things, like what if one of us dies or one of us gets to say, but what are some of the kind of niggly little details that often get overlooked in a partnership agreement that you guys did a good job papering beyond just what happens in the sale?
The one that comes to mind is the bad boy clause. Have you heard of that one?
No.
So basically, if something happens to one of the partners, there's a felony and it impacts the business, or they do something where they're not able to participate in the business like they could have in previous to that. So they are, really when it comes, they get thrown in jail or into prison and you can never reach them again. It triggers the bad boy clause, which triggers a sales price that is not the highest valuation. And so we talked about that at different times and what would trigger different valuations of the business if someone needed to get out for whatever reason, or someone wanted to get out, or if someone did something stupid and we needed to get them out. And so the valuation triggers that we use for those different purposes were different. And, if someone just wants to get out of a business just because they're tired of it, they're not getting full valuation for it. And it comes at a cost. And that might be a price reduction. Well, absolutely a price reduction, but also terms of the sale. You're not going to get a bunch of cash right away. So those were some of the things that I'd never heard about, never thought about before. But especially if you're in a franchise or you're doing something that, like in a franchise, if you do something wrong, there's a felony or it impacts the franchisor, they can terminate your agreement. And if that happens to one of my partners and the franchise agreement gets terminated, well, there goes my cash flow, there goes my asset. And the rest of the partners can't have that because of someone's actions. And so we started to talk about that. And that was something that was, unique. I'd never heard about before, but also, if it ever did happen, I'd be happy that we have it in there.
Was there, I have this total, I love California to be, I'll just put my cards on the table right out of the gate, but I have this image of 4 swashbuckling entrepreneurs driving around in convertibles, not wanting to do any of the work. Am I getting the image at all right? Were you guys sort of, when you use the word like semi-autonomous business, I had this visualization of guys that don't want to get into the details, don't want to do the work. They just kind of want to be entrepreneurs. Was there any of that sort of vibe among the four partners where you had to kind of say, no, actually, you got to actually do some work?
No, I think.
Do you know what I'm sort of the stereotype I have in my mind?
No, I think you're absolutely right. That's how we all were. That's how we all are. And we knew it about each other. The nice thing about all of us is if the work needs to get done, we're able to get it done. But the goal is not to work in the business. And so to that point early on, we were having to do work, and we're like, holy cow, this is a lot more work than we signed up for, because we're not signing up for a bunch of work. And so what we did is we had some employees that we had hired early on, and they kind of got the job done, but they just weren't able to take a lot off of our plates as owners. And then we realized they were, one person making $50,000-$60,000 a year was reporting to 4 different people. And we're like, this isn't working either. And so what we did is we said we need to hire a district operation manager, hire someone that's really high caliber that can be the voice of the 4 owners to everybody else in the business, including the corporate office, and be our voice and be that person. And so we took that really serious, and a couple of the partners took that on and spent quite a bit of time to find that one person. And we found them the first time that our first hire was the person that we were looking for. And they really helped take the business from, I think it was 3 stores at the time, to 12 stores when we sold it. And they drove the development. They were loved by the corporate office. We loved him. And so he knew he was herding cats. I mean, with the 4 of us doing all kinds of other things, really smart, knew a lot, knew how to grow, knew what to do, but owning 25% of the business, it just didn't move the needle for any of us. So that was probably the best thing that we did, was hire our main man, Mirko.
And how did you incentivize him to stay? Did he have shares or some sort of agreement that?
We paid him a lot of money. And hindsight, we would have given him equity. And because eventually what happened is he started his own solas. And so we got the phone call, and so before that, we knew he was just super smart. And we would be on calls with the 4 of us partners, and we're like, Mirko's so smart. He's not gonna stay with us forever. Should we do something about it, or just wait another 6 months? And we never did anything about it. And we got the phone call. He's like, hey, everyone, I need to talk to you. And he said, I've loved working for you guys. I've learned a lot. I think, this thing's awesome, and so awesome, I'm going to buy some myself. And I got some investors backing me up because they've seen what I've done for you in Orange County, and herding a bunch of cats like you guys. So if I can do that, I can do it on my own. I just need the money. And he went out and raised money and has some very successful ones himself. And so we had conversations with him throughout that whole thing. Our initial reaction, at least my initial reaction, was, this is horrible. We should have given him equity, although we should have done this. But, we were all mature enough and had mutual respect for each other. He stayed on as kind of an advisor, a paid advisor, to the very end. And he was critical during the selling point of it as well. So, he's been fantastic through this whole process. But hindsight, if we would have given him equity in the business, and we talked about this with him, he's like, yeah, guys, you should have given me equity, and I would have taken it, and we would have built more faster and sold it for even more money. And that's what we should have done, 100%. And it's changed the way I structure my businesses today.
In what way? What do you do now?
I have 3 Pilates studios that I'm building out in Denver, Colorado, and I have a manager there who's paid a good amount of money, but she's also earning 5% equity. I have some weight loss clinics in other states, and we brought on a 20% equity partner that they are the face of the business, and they paid 10%. And they earning 10% equity into the business. I have another partnership on some yoga studios that it's a 50-50 partnership. and I'm there for advice, and money, but he's the face of the business. So definitely using equity, whether it's partnership, whether it's manager, but it's to give ownership to the key people running the business. And
what's the downside? I mean, I can see tons of upside for sure. What's the downside of giving an owner, like an operator, a little bit of equity? What do you need to watch out for?
Well, the downside for us at 𝙬𝙊, or what we saw as the downside, is we're just giving up cash flow and we're giving up a sales price at the end, but we didn't equate it to value and how much more value Mirko could have added to the asset versus, if we would have given him 10% equity, we would have earned probably 20% of value in the company by doing that. And so it was kind of short-sighted for us, but that was it. We're like, we thought we would lose capital. I mean, capital injection into our pockets on a sale, and then just distributions. We didn't want to give up distributions. And I think the biggest thing now is what happens if they just don't turn out to be nearly as good as we think they are? How can I get out of a bad situation? And I'm not the expert in that yet, but again, how I went about it with the partnership agreement and the operating agreement for the partners, having good attorneys, listening to a lot of people who are farther ahead than me in this whole thing, and taking advice from them, talking to the attorneys, and then having very open, honest conversations with the people that I'm doing business with, whether it's a true partner or it is that equity person. And I love having very open, honest conversations with people. And if they respond to that and they're the same way, then it's usually going to end pretty well.
Awesome. So let's get into, speaking of endings, the actual sale itself. So you guys are building up. You've got 12 stores in various, stages of development. What triggered you guys to want to sell?
So we were at a crossroads. It was so we'd built out our development plan, and we were nearing our 12 units that were going to be open, and we had purchased the rights to buy 3 more. And we did that because we wanted to protect the area, like we said earlier on in the podcast. And so we knew that corporate 𝙬𝙊 had their eye on the Orange County market because they sold it early on to us to develop, and there's a lot more room to develop than what we had developed. So we knew we were a target for growth for them. They wanted to get more people, more stores open up there. So it was either going to be us, we're going to have to double down, or it was time to look at selling it. And
was keeping it an option, Erik? Like, did your franchise agreement allow you to just basically write it out and keep it as a cash cow?
100%. We could have written it out and developed 3 more for a total of 15. The challenge is if other people started to come in, they would definitely feed off of what we had built. And if they start if they start doing things to drive prices down or just cannibalizing stores, then our asset value would decrease. And it might increase, but the chances, we were not in full control of that. And so that was definitely a factor.
Okay, when you say other people coming in, I'm assuming your franchise agreement with 𝙬𝙊 forbid anyone to come into that Orange County region that you don't. They couldn't have had somebody, a 𝙬𝙊 franchisee.
No, so we could have built out our 15. Once we're done with our 15, we could either continue to build out a lot more faster, maybe 8 in 2 more years, and that would have been a lot to build out and taking on leases that were not as favorable and just starting to cannibalize some of our own stores, or they could sell it to other franchisees who are dying to get into the Orange County market, and they would have built out, let's just call it 8 stores in 2 years, and that still would have had a negative impact, and we wouldn't have had the control that we had for so long.
That's helpful for sure. So, head office wants this kind of territory back or whatever. So that was kind of one influence. Was there a straw that broke the camel's back that actually accelerated your discussions to sell?
No, there was rumors of private equity coming in and buying out some of the owners or some of the owners' shares so they could cash out a little bit at Sola Corporate. Matt and Stratton, who are, they were the founders of Sola, great guys and friends to this day. But we knew that they were, probably going to take some of the chips off the table themselves. And we did not know what that private equity group was. It was an unknown. And so whenever there's an unknown, it causes me to kind of reevaluate everything. And sometimes those unknowns are the greatest things that happen. And sometimes, they're not so great. So we started to do this dance with corporate because we wanted them to know that we were still gung-ho on developing, which we were, but we also wanted them to know that we were open to selling. And so we just started talking to them about valuation. How do you value these businesses? And they would give a generic answer and we would come back with something else. But at some point, I don't know how or when, I think it was at a dinner that we were all at in Austin, Texas, with some of the higher ups at Sola and a couple of the business partners. And we said, well, what would you guys want to buy it for? And they were like, well, are you interested in selling? Well, we might be if the price is right, but we want to continue to develop more. So there was a dance that went on for a while. And then we came to the conclusion that they were serious about buying and we were serious about selling. And, it was interesting as well because they weren't desperate to buy and we were not desperate to sell. Even throughout the whole sales process, there were times when we said, do we even want to sell? Even to the 11th hour, there were times when we said, screw it. Let's just keep it. It's a great business. We don't need to sell it. Let's not sell it.
So when you guys are back and forth on like, what do you think it's worth? What do you think it's worth? Like, are you throwing out a number like X million dollars, or are you throwing out, well, we think it's worth, 5 times earnings or 1 times revenue or whatever? Were you throwing out a valuation number or an actual sort of offer?
We were throwing out valuation numbers. We were, in our past businesses, we were used to, a certain multiple of EBITDA. And that's how we were valuing it. And we had, we knew our numbers very well. And so, we thought, well, with a passive business, 6 employees in a business that's probably producing $6 million in revenue and very strong net profit margins, very strong, what do we want to do with that? And so we think it's, it's a higher multiple because, these things are kicking off a bunch of cash. What else are we going to do? But the partners at this time, John, we're spending about 2 hours a week max on the business. And that's a 2-hour conference call with our team. That's it. And so very little owner involvement from us, during the last few years.
No wonder Mirko's going, okay, God, I want a piece of this action. Oh, yeah. I'm working 80 hours a week here and for my salary. And you guys are jumping on a call once a week.
Well, maybe he's not as smart as we thought. Maybe he was just like pretty average because he's not.
I'm sure he's pretty smart.
And he learned from us. And so we were like, we were thinking higher multiples. We were like, this thing's worth 10x or 12x. And so we were thinking about that, some of our just cash cows. And because we don't want to sell something that's, producing a bunch of cash flow for, 3x or 4x. And they're looking at some of our dogs and they're like, we don't want to pay hardly anything for this thing because this thing's not to profitability yet or slowly, or, we had 2 of them that were much slower growth. And
2 of the 12 units weren't performing as well as the others. 2 of the 12 units weren't up.
2,
okay.
One of them was not performing very well and it was a slow start. And the other one had been a slow start, but was performing, but not to the point where some of them were performing 10 times what the underperformers were doing.
So when you express the profitability of this company, when you talk about EBITDA, are you talking about, operating EBITDA or kind of normalized or adjusted EBITDA? Like in theory, when all the stores are fully up and running, we should be generating X amount of profit? Or are you actually talking about what you are generating profit?
We were a little bit of both. We were talking about what we are generating in profit, but that was some of the challenge because it was adjusted. What's it going to look like for a store that had just opened up in 3 months? They're not full. And if you're not full, 50% occupancy is kind of like that break even point. And so if you're not full and you're not going to be full for another 6 months or 12 months, there's a run rate there. And so they started to look at that and they were like, well, you're not going to be full for 2 years at this rate. And we're thinking we're going to be full in 3 months. And, the truth is somewhere in the middle. But that's where we were just going back and forth on that, on some of the old ones that were not performing very good, some of the new ones that didn't have a chance to perform. And then and they didn't want to pay super high multiples on the ones that were performing incredible, because then it sets the standard for other people. And they wanted to have they wanted to be able to kind of have a standard multiple that they pay. So it became clear after, a month or so of trying to come to an agreement on multiple that we were just getting nowhere because we were coming at it from two completely different angles. And again, we weren't desperate to sell and they weren't desperate to buy. So we ended up, the partners, we just got together for a couple hours and said, what are we going to do? There's a price. At the end of the day, a buyer's willing to pay what a seller's willing to sell it for. What's our sales price? And we came up with it and we said, guys, here it is. And that's when, and we started out high, and it's because it gave us some room for negotiation because we knew that they would want to negotiate, of course. And we settled on a price shortly after that. And they worked it the way that they wanted to work it. And we worked it the way that we wanted to work it.
How did you guys come up with the number?
Basically, is it worth it to sell at this point? Can we take this money that will hit our bank account on the day that we sell, and can we deploy that to make as much or more money that we're making today without a bunch of headache?
What's the set up for the other three partners? I mean, are you guys all at similar life stages? You mentioned you got 3 young kids. I mean, is everybody sort of at the same stage of life, or is it disparate?
Yeah, we are. We look at, sometimes we're on the phone with each other and we just laugh at how far we've all come, because none of us came, with this big boost of a bunch of money early on. We're entrepreneurs, and we hustled and we built and over the years, and we've done well. And our lifestyle now, we just pinch ourselves. We're like, can you believe this? One of my partners just accidentally bought $1 million house the other day. And
accidentally.
And I said, how does that accidentally happen? Do that? And he told me, and sure enough, he kind of accidentally bought it. But, we were just laughing because he was just a couple of days ago, he's like, hey, I was just looking back at like the first $1,000 kind of deposit check that I wrote to buy my first franchise. And he's like, that was a big deal to me at this time. And now I accidentally bought $1 million house. And what he's going to do is he'll sell it for a lot more money and make a bunch of money off of it. But that's the kind of guy that he is. That's the kind of entrepreneurs that we are. So we're very much at the same stage in life. My kids are 4, 6, and 9. I'm probably the youngest, have the youngest kids out of all of us. But we're all, in our early 40s, young families, and just really enjoy life and enjoy the time with our families.
It's one of the things that that we've heard a lot about on this show is how important it is for partners to either be at the same kind of stage in life, in particular around your finances. Because if you've got one partner who's trying to get their first foot on the first rung of the success ladder, and you've got another partner who's obviously wildly wealthy, it can cause very different motivations, or especially around the boardroom table when you're looking at selling.
Yeah, I can see that. And there were some, some of us wanted to continue to build because they thought this is the horse that we're going to ride to make have a sale in 2 years that's 2 or 3 or 4 times what we had today. Others were like, you know what, we've got an incredible opportunity to exit now. And one of the things is, there were some other parts of the deal that are not related to price, but they're as important in many ways, and that's the lease assignments. If the landlord doesn't want to let you off the lease, and you have to stay on as a personal guarantor to the new buyer, and the new buyer doesn't have as deep pockets as you do, or they don't have the ability to operate as well as you do, then that can come back to bite you. And so knowing that's private equity and they were able to indemnify us and things like that, that was really important in the decision-making process as well. And so I think that's, some of the things that put all the partners on the same page. And all of us, to your point, all of us have bought other businesses even before we sold it in anticipation of the sale.
How much did the offer drop, if you will, from, you mentioned you kind of started high in the dream number and then you kind of settled on a number less than what you started out at. How much did you guys have to drop on a percentage basis? I think it was a couple million. It wasn't drastic. It wasn't a massive amount, but I think it was a couple million that it dropped. And I don't know, I don't know that you can actually share the actual number. My understanding though was it was an 8-figure exit. Is that kind of what you're allowed to say, if you will? Yeah.
I sent an email like a good franchisee and said, "Hey, can I say it was an 8-figure exit?" And they said no problem. Got it. But so I'm imagining you're whiz with numbers, and you might somehow figure out the exact sales price through your questioning.
I'm not that good. Yeah, but I appreciate you sharing. So, did you still have a lot of debt on the business because you'd taken on some debt to build these things out? How did you handle the debt from the leasehold improvements?
Yeah, so like I said, each one was probably $1 million to build out on average, and some of these we were. When you go into a lease and you have a significant build out like this, and this is one of the great things about having a franchise like Sola, the landlords loved us because of Sola's track record of 0 failures and just the power behind the brand. And so we got favorable lease terms and favorable tenant improvement dollars. And some of ours, on more than one occasion, we got $50 in tenant improvement dollars back from the landlord after we built out. So $50 on 7,000 square feet, is a big check to get back as a rebate.
Yeah, it's like $350,000, right? I'm not that good with numbers, so you got to help me.
You almost figured out the sales price.
There you go.
No, yeah, I mean, you get $350,000 back on some of these, and it changes the starting point. I mean, you don't have $1 million into it by any means. And early on in 2014, we were getting a lot of those deals where we were getting $50 in tenant improvement or TI dollars. And that was normal to us. And it wasn't normal to the leasing agents working for us because we went in and assumed that. And then we got the leasing agents to believe like that was normal. And so pretty soon, a lot of people are like, "How are you guys getting these TIs?" And we're like, "It's just normal." And we kept doing that until the landlords are like, "Hey, the market's changed. We're in more control now." So we wish we had started signing more leases early on, because we ended up paying a lot more money later on for some of the same leases that we could have gotten much better deals on if we had signed earlier.
Because I guess you started still when the Great Recession was starting to we were still in the sort of depths of that.
Yeah. There were still vacancies around, and there weren't people aggressively building like we were, and we were really bullish, but the landlords are still feeling it.
TI dollars, tenant improvement dollars. How does that work? So are you literally getting a check for $350,000, or is that just reducing your rent you owe over the life of the lease by that amount?
It's a literal check.
Really?
And sometimes you have to fight for it. In the lease, the landlords will say, yeah, you'll get a check, 1 month after you have CO or certificate of occupancy. So 1 month later, you get your check. Well, that's when they say that you can apply for your check. And, a lot of times it was 3 months later, we would get a physical check for that, $350. And they were happy to do it. We were happy to take it. And a lot of times the lenders, because we got some different lenders later on. And so we would get $1 million loan or, $800,000 loan on the build out and put in, $1 million into that build out and get a check back to us for $350.
Amazing. So with regards to the lenders, how does it work? And again, this is just my ignorance coming out. When you sell your company, and you still got like an SBA loan as an example, do you have the rights to just pay that off with the proceeds of the sale, or do you have to continue to honor the terms of the loan? Again, this is just total curiosity on my end.
So I don't know what it's like for all loans, but we had a number of different loans, and we refinanced some during the process as well. All of our loans, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, there was 0 prepayment penalty. So the banks were bummed that we sold because they got paid off, and some of them had like a 1% or 2% penalty for early payment, and so that was just part of the deal. But we that's something that as I am into other businesses now, if I haven't thinking about selling before the loan term's up, that's definitely on my radar more than it was when I first started Sola.
The kind of what'd you call it, prepayment terms?
Yeah, prepayment penalty if we sell the business or refinance the loan, there's a penalty that we have to pay. But it was nothing like, if you're getting a loan, you're paying 6% interest that you owe all interest or something like that. We didn't have anything like that in any of our loans.
It sounds like such a fantastic sale. If there was one thing that you might do differently, if you could do it all over again, I know one thing would be to maybe give a few shares to Mirko. What else might you do differently if you had the whole transaction to do over again?
Well, it was pretty easy for me because my partner, Dan, did a lot of the heavy lifting towards the end because we needed to have one person kind of be the voice for the group. So if he was on the podcast, he'd probably have a completely different podcast because he had to deal with some of the, just the wear and tear of negotiations. And so we didn't have to deal with a lot of that. If I had to change, there's some things that I had to change. It would be coming to that price agreement sooner than later, that kind of take it or leave it price. And then the other thing that we did not know was going to be as difficult, and it almost screwed up the deal multiple times, was having landlord consent. So on deals like this, when you're dealing with big landlords, they don't like to, some of them are just a pain. They're just an absolute pain to deal with. And it's worse than getting a loan and having them remove you from the loan. Even if you're staying on as a personal guarantor, they'll run credit. They'll ask for updated financial statements. It's just absolutely insane how some of these landlords are. And it delayed the deal. And we were supposed to close months earlier, but part of it was landlord consents. They were not a hurry at all to do anything and to sign
there's nothing in it for them, right?
No
like
motivation.
They're not, yeah, right.
No, it's the only downside. I have to, yeah. So that I would have started that way earlier than we had. I mean, today we've sold 11 of the 12. Today is our 12th one is actually getting sold. We got all the releases, and I see that all that paperwork coming through today. So we'll be getting another check next week for the 12th and final one. But yeah, that's been a pain.
Man, I'm so indebted for you to educate me. I can't remember such a comprehensive episode on a retail business, because so many of our businesses that we do for this show are kind of B2B businesses, service businesses, but you've really shone an amazing light on some of the intricacies and ins and outs of selling a sort of a storefront business. So I'm just hugely grateful for you sharing the story, Erik.
Oh, I'm glad to be on. It's been a lot of fun being able to relive some of this.
So how do people, what's next for you? Is there a website you want to send people to, or like, how can people reach out and introduce themselves to you if you're okay with them doing that? Is there a way for them to say hi?
Yeah, 100%. So I have a website called I Love Franchising. Very simple, 𝙁𝙊𝙐𝙇𝙊𝙒.com. And on there, there's different ways to connect with me. If you're looking at buying a franchise, I still help people do that. If you want to connect with, there's links to like some private Facebook groups where, franchisees, I've just created it so franchisees can just learn and grow together and get better. So find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I love to help people.
Erik Van Horn, I really appreciate you spending the time with me, and thank you, and best of luck with your new franchise.
Hey, thanks a bunch, John. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Built to Sell Radio with John Warrillow. For complete show notes with links to additional resources, visit 𝙁𝙊𝙐𝙇𝙊𝙒.blog. John is the founder of the Value Builder System. To find out how to improve the value of your business by 71%, visit valuebuildersystem.com. John is also the author of Built to Sell, Creating a Business That Can Thrive Without You, and The Automatic Customer, Creating a Subscription Business in Any Industry. Connect with John at facebook.com/built-to-sell or on Twitter at John Warrillow, WARRILLOW. Thanks for listening.